Charlie was a good man, good as any man can be. Tall in stature, strong in faith, and he practiced what he preached. A Christian with conviction, I've heard many of people say Charlie was gonna be the president someday. At a campus up in Utah on a bright September day, the crowd was packed and rustling, engaged in free debate, till a bullet from a rooftop ended young Charlie's life. Dear God, they killed him, took him from his children and his wife. Help us understand now, Jesus, dry our eyes to see. Teach us how to deal now with this senseless tragedy. Turn this rage and anger into something you can use. Use Charlie's death now to turn us back to you.
Well, I had to start off with a tribute to Charlie Kirk. This is Jeremiah Gunn Show. I had to start off with that because this last section of the magical, tragical history tour of us being the United States, is, Charlie Kirk's story of his life kind of tells us a lot about where we're at and so forth. And so, beautiful song. The guy's kind of channeling Bob Dylan or imitating him. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Good job. Guy did a good job. So, that song takes a turn, talks about how he was killed just talking in front of his children and his wife. And that's what I want to talk about. Now, that song says, Jesus, help us understand. Well, I understand. And Jesus helped dry our eyes. And I appreciate that, but, he shouldn't have to. Jesus shouldn't have to dry our eyes. This song, there was an old song, not long ago, Jesus, take the wheel, Well, Jesus can take the wheel, but if your government allows drunk drivers to kill one of us every half hour, forever, then, does Jesus have to take the wheel, or do we have to take the wheel and get some order restored here? Jesus already, made sense he died to make sense out of our lives. But he also said, he said to the Pharisees, the hypocrites, the leaders of the world, whether it's false religion or real religion, doesn't matter, the ones that were against him, he said, which one of the prophets don't you kill? Which one of the prophets didn't you kill? And then build a monument to them. So, this is a deep misunderstanding here that we're talking about. We don't need Jesus to explain it to us again and again. We have the First Amendment, and then we have these devils that are on the left that are taking everything away from us. That's why they're destroying our country, and we have to be men. Jesus said in his New Testament, the Judeo-Christian wisdom literature, he said, act like men. So we're not going to, we're going to watch somebody come into our house, kill our family, and take all our stuff and just go, oh, well, Jesus, help me understand some of this. Help me to understand it. It sounds nice, but it's not really. I think that Jesus, after all he said, he would say, don't look at me. Look at yourself. I left. I'm the master of the vineyard. I'm the owner. I'm the landlord, and I left and hoped you guys would take care of this. When I come back, I don't want to find you sleeping, drunk, beating up the servants, wasting all my profit that I thought I was going to have out of this vineyard. I don't, he already warned us. So I don't know what more Charlie Kirk should have done to help people make sense out of their life and out of his life. But if we're going to just let the inmates have the keys, let the women take over, like the one that shot him, then it's not going to work well. It's not going to work out. This is 1776 again. We have tyrants who want to crush our Constitution and our civilization. This is the Jeremiah Gunn Show. I'm your, what do you call that? I'm your undocumented expert. I'm your humble savant. I was talking to one of my mentors and heroes, and we were talking about how many things I've committed to my memory, how many books I've read, and, like over 500 of the most important books. And not whatever, I don't even know what the most current novel is, but, I didn't read 50 Shades of Grey like the women, bought off the shelves until they couldn't reprint anymore, and then complained about toxic masculinity. Anyway, let's get back. This is part 6 of the Magical Tragical History Tour of us. And remember, when we say us, we mean the United States. So let's just pick it back up. I think we kind of left off on World War XI, as Ilhan Omar calls it. But she saw on her cue card or her pod, it probably wasn't a teleprompter, it probably was a speech that somebody wrote for her. She saw World War II come up. She was trying to complain about illegal migration, that she calls immigration, in this asylum that is being run right now. It's an asylum. It's mad. The world is mad. America is insane, and we can't even pull people out of the fire anymore in Europe like we used to, because we're so crazy and hysterical. That's what we're talking about, history, not hysteria. Okay? So when we go back, what kind of led up to the war, and we talked about Hitler, well, let's take the year 1927. That's the year that the Japanese planned Pearl Harbor. Over across in Europe, Hitler had just gotten out of prison for treason, and he was working to take over. He'd started the Nazi Party, and he was on his way to taking over. Now, he could not, there was actually a law that he couldn't speak in public because he was a traitor. He had done time for terrorism and treason. And so he was not qualified to run for chancellor, but he brought it back up. So that's going on over there, and over in Asia. Japan is just starting to destroy all of Asia, starting with China. In Italy, one of the other Axis powers, remember it was Japan, Germany, and Italy. Mussolini was a young man growing up around 1927-ish. He was over there plotting all of his fellow Italians' future, and also the Ethiopians that they slaughtered, and. And you know who his hero was? Woodrow Wilson, the great Christian, PhD nightmare. There are people who do whole series on him. I'm not going to spend the time on him, but just know he was a racist, eugenicist, socialist, tyrant, dictator. He presided over the first COVID scamdemic, which was the Spanish influenza that came from Kansas, but they called it the Spanish influenza. Anyway, Woodrow Wilson was a big hero of his because he loved the way he used a crisis to take over people's lives, tell them what to wear, where to go, what to eat, what they can do for a living, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Ration, the warmth of collectivism, as Mom Dummy calls it. So when World War II broke out, the Japanese envoys were talking peace with our Secretary of State in Washington, D.C., X hours earlier or later, whatever. Across in Hawaii, they were attacking. And the two envoys or whatever, they said, hey, they told Cordell Hull or whoever the secretary, they said, hey, we didn't know this was going to happen. He's sitting there talking to them about peace because we had tension with them since 1936, which was the year of Hitler's Olympics. And They're like, we didn't know. We didn't have any idea that was going to happen. I believe it. Why would the imperialist warlords tell their ambassadors, let that guy think that we're talking peace, and then we attack? So, talk just for a second about Charlie Kirk before we plunge into World War II some more. That song, there's this idea that I mentioned before that if women ruled the world, there wouldn't be any wars. And Jeanette Rankin, who was the first woman elected to Congress and the Senate and so forth, she said, I'm a pacifist. So she voted after Pearl Harbor, FDR asked for a declaration of war. They voted 388-1. She was the one. She said, well, I'm a woman and I can't go to war, so I don't want anybody else to go to war either. Well, that's what you want. I mean, too bad they didn't have a coexist sticker back then. She could put it on her Model T. But that it doesn't kind of work the way you want it to. But this idea that if women run things, we wouldn't have any wars. Well, women do run things, especially here, especially now. It was about that same time of World War I that women began to take over, and they fully control the government, education, media-tainment complex. So when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, murdered, they had a lot of sympathy for his poor new bride and his little babies, little toddlers and baby. No, that's not right. They celebrated. They celebrated online. Women, nurses in the healing profession, teachers in the molding of children profession, so-called. They celebrated. It was led by women, mostly teachers, mostly university professors. And the men who did anything like that, they're women. So, no offense, but that's the way the wisdom literature and our founding fathers set it up, is that, men ought not to act in unmanly ways like that. So women celebrated. They led the celebration over Charlie Kirk's assassination on the news. That's why we call it the government education media-tainment complex. Nancy Pelosi, the first woman to be Speaker of the House. And what'd she do with it? She was a witch. She's a devil witch. And, if you're going to say, well, yeah, but you're against women. No. It's more the other way around. Women, there was a woman at Home Depot who celebrated, posted a video celebrating Charlie Kirk getting killed. These are the people that are for gun control. These are the people that if they ruled the world, a hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. Well, maybe about the time they started killing the baby before it got in the cradle, I'm sorry, maybe that's about when they changed from having to being without natural affection. How many of these shooters recently were trans and going and becoming voluntary mutants with double mastectomy, a perfectly healthy person, or becoming eunuchs? If you're doing that to become a woman, then you can't really count that against men, can you? Toxic masculinity, right? It's pretty toxic to be celebrating. So this woman at Home Depot, and some guy confronted her and, hey, is this you, lady, posting this video celebrating Charlie Kirk's murder? Is this you? And she calls security. And Home Depot, who's run, I think, by a conservative owner, he has to tell the guy, hey, leave. Really? That's how we're going to... I go to a local nursery to buy some stuff, landscaping stuff, and I told the lady, it's a family-owned business. They have a few chains, a few stores, and I told her, I said, hey, there was a woman at Home Depot who was celebrating online that Charlie Kirk got shot, or Trump. I guess in that case it was Trump. They were posting that they wish that guy would have been a better shot. And this woman says to me, this waste of space, she says, well, I said that. But I didn't say it public. I said it at home. Why would she think that I want to know that when I'm standing there complaining to her? Well, everybody has a right to express whatever. No, that's not correct. I go to Costco, and there's this Persian pussy. There's a man, so-called, sitting there. He's about the size of a jockey, and he's watching a speech of Crown Prince, the Shah, the son of the Shah, who's trying to get that country to be a country for once. If there's enough men in it, apparently not. And he's watching that. So I spoke Farsi to him. I figured he was, and I started saying that. I said, Marakbar Khomeini, and he says, oh, that means death to Khomeini. Remember, the first one was Khomeini, and this one's Khomeini, I guess. And he says, oh, he's already dead, but you know who needs to be dead is Trump. Now, here's a guy sitting on his ass in a kiosk trying to sell something to a potential customer, and he feels free enough to tell me that he wishes Trump was dead. Why are you watching a video of the Crown Prince? What's wrong with you women? What's wrong with you? I'm going to see what I can do to get that guy fired. Got to do something. But this queendom's government, education, media attainment complex, it's more evil than anything I've ever seen men do. And you can't say, well, Hitler was a man and look what he did. Yeah, well, he couldn't have done any of that without the women. So the women, am I attacking, are you a group? Oh, women are underpaid. Women are paid less than, that's been debunked plenty of times. Most recently at Google. But women are paid less, and women this and women that, and women should have the right to do what they want with their body. Well, women is not a polymorphic thing. It's not a monolithic thing. That's what Biden tried to struggle when he was dissing the blacks. They said the Hispanics aren't monolithic like the blacks are, but don't vote for me. If you don't vote for me, you ain't black, y'all. Anyway, so women marry serial killers. Charlie Kirk's widow, the mother of his fatherless children. And, that song, by the way, says Charlie was going to be president. So I don't think you can say was going to about anybody. But it could have been. He was so far along at 32, which was the age of Thomas Jefferson. And he knew so much, and he was so in love with America. Yeah, give him a few more years. Give him 30 more years? Are you kidding me? He even moved people like Bill Maher and Elon Musk. I mean, but his wife, Erica, she's going to take over for him. First thing she does with her womanliness or whatever you want to call it, she says she forgives. She goes to his funeral and says, I forgive the shooter for her own virtue signaling and self-aggrandizement. I mean, that's not what you do. That's not what you do. Erica, no offense. I love Charlie more than anybody in the country. But do you think that Mary Todd Lincoln forgave John Wilkes Booth? Do you think Mrs. Garfield, James Abram Garfield, do you think his wife forgave the shooter? I know their names, but I'm not going to say them. The shooter, the murderer, the thief. A thief comes only to rob and kill and destroy. Steal, kill, and destroy. That's what a thief comes to do. That guy on the left was enabled by the government education media attainment complex. He was celebrated by them. The universities you send your kids to school to, they celebrated. They celebrated because they control the word hate. They're going to say that he was filled with hate, not the guy that shot him. The guy that shot him, the Tran or whatever, was a poor baby, a victim of Charlie's hate. So, these people from Kimmy Kimmel, that's again, education, media attainment, CNN, PMSDNC, All these people, these late night hosts, late night talk show hosts or whatever. I mean, The View, they celebrate a man at 32 being taken away from his wife and children and us, all of us. I would have loved for him to be president based on the way he was going. Of course. It's gone. Just like they took Lincoln while he was president. They took Charlie before he could be. And now they're trying to take Trump while he's president, before he can be. I mean, why do we allow this? Did Mary Todd forgive her husband's murderer? Did James Abram Garfield's wife? Did William McKinley's wife? These are all of these Republican generals like Grant, and I forgot Benjamin Harrison the other day. It was a whole line of nothing but Republican heroes who tried to free the slaves from the Democrats. These were the guys that were assassinated. And, okay. Did Mary Todd forgive? Did they go grab the newspaper of the day and say, first of all, let everybody know I forgive? I mean, that's just wrong-headed and mistaken. Plenty of time to forgive him on his way to the lethal injection or the electric chair. In Utah, they have a shooting. They have death by firing squad. A guy named Gary Gilmore who killed some guys in a gas station or a motel. He got it. He wanted it. He didn't want to live knowing what he did. What are these guys? No, Mary Todd, that we know of, Mary Todd Lincoln didn't forgive her husband's murderer. I don't think the Secretary of State or anybody else did either. Did Mrs. Garfield? Nope. Did Mrs. McKinley? Nope. Did Jackie Kennedy forgive her husband's killer? Not that I know of. RFK's widow? 5 years later? Did RFK's widow? Sorry, I don't commit her name to memory. Martin Luther King's wife? I think it's Coretta Scott King. Did Betty Ford forgive the shooter, which was a woman? That's when it started to be woman shooters. Her husband was shot at. Did Nancy Reagan forgive Hinckley? Nope, but the Government Education Meditainment Complex did. They give him time for murder, for insanity. Oh, he's insane. Okay. So you come home from work. Just like the guy that shot McKinley. You get 29 years, or Garfield, or you get 29 years in prison. In a mental hospital, and then release him. And now they have this new law where the son of Sam, this serial killer in New York, they have a law because when you get to be 55, you start collecting your Social Security, you can't do it on the inside, so you're going to probably do. We got to let you out. Get this guy who killed the principal of my kid's high school when he was young. Someone killed us. They just let him out because California is very interested in, once you reach a certain age, we got to let you out. I don't know what that is. But anyway, so you come home from work and you find out your whole family's been murdered. Or you get a call from work and your spouse says, well, somebody came in and murdered him. And then after years and months of agonizing trial, they say, well, he was insane, of course. He was insane. What difference does it make? The woman who drowned her children in the bathtub, speaking of women, one by one as they begged her, like, Mommy, what are you doing? Was she insane? God, I hope so. But that doesn't matter. How should that matter? Martin Luther King's wife, Betty Ford, Nancy Reagan, Melania Trump. There's a new movie about her. It's just a basic documentary. She's into architecture and fashion. It was a little bit empty, but it was all right. That's fine. She's an immigrant. That's what she's into. Okay. But she was very worried about, are we getting out of the car at this point in the inaugural? Because Barron doesn't want to. Well, of course not. But did she forgive the 3 or 4 or 5, I'm losing track, people that tried to kill him, including the government, the CIA, or the FBI, or Comey? Comey, that woman, 6'7" woman, he spells out on the sand with rocks like he's a TikTok Facebooker BFF, and he spells out 8647. You know, at this point, I got a little problem with Trump and MAGA. I mean, what are you guys doing? We did everything we could. We elected you. Now you do the thing. You arrest these people. Arrest them. Get the ones that are behind, that are enabling these people, whether they're professors, members of Congress, media. Go get them. You can't even go get Kimmy Kimmel. You just have to give him a day off. And then he becomes a hero to the left. They hate us. They hate us. Trump's just in the way. They're trying to hate us. They're trying to kill us. Jane Fonda, her dad played Lincoln. She goes over to Vietnam because she's so smart. She's a young pornography actress. She goes over there and sits in an anti-aircraft gun and says, I wish I had one of those murderers on my site now. Then they take her to meet the POWs. One of the POWs, this is Henry Fonda's daughter, for God's sake, passes her a note saying, don't believe anything they tell you. They're torturing us. And she hands it to the Vietnamese captors, and that guy got severely tortured and punished. And somebody that doesn't, but she grew up, right? Nope. The traitor should have been hanged, should have been deported at a minimum. She goes on The View recently with her plastic surgery nightmare that she, shell that she's walking around in. She goes on there and says that she wants to kill pro-lifers. She goes on The View and says she wants to kill pro-lifers. These are the people that called the Vietnam veterans coming home from Vietnam. They called them baby killers. A lot of women did that. It was women that were behind all the slavery and anti-civil rights stuff of the Democrat Party. The men weren't doing it alone. The men weren't doing it alone. And they had the right to vote by the 50s and 60s. Kathy Griffin, so-called comedian, she's showing a picture of holding up Trump's head, severed head. The only consolation is she looks worse now than he did in that dummy head that was made up. Madonna said she wants to blow up the White House. Not in her bathroom, not on TikTok, at a rally in Washington, I think. Martha Stewart cozies up with Snoopy Dogg, or whatever his name is, that pothead fool. He made a video of him assassinating Trump. Trump was made up look like a clown, and he shoots him in the head. And Martha Stewart, I think she's a woman, cozies up to him. So, what are we... Maxine Waters says she wants to take him out. She wants to take Trump. I will take Trump out. The Squad, half of them are Islamo-Nazi terrorists. Nancy Pelosi, devil, rips up the State of the Union. That's what she saw in the dignity of being the honor of being the woman, the first woman Speaker of the House. What'd she do? Tears it up. So they can talk about toxic masculinity, but I can't call that toxic femininity, because I think femininity, didn't feminine mean something? I forgot Teddy Roosevelt's wife. He was shot while he was making a speech, but he survived. He wound up becoming president because McKinley was shot, his boss, when he was VP. So kind of a little detour because of the war on men that's been going on for probably 100 years. And it's called a war on women, just as George Orwell predicted. They will use this newspeak to hypnotize you with these stupid phrases. So back to World War II, which kind of, let's talk just a little bit about the tragedy of the Jews. I said last time that I don't think we would have gone into the war just over the Jews. You look at what we did at the Olympics in 1936, and when you go to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., I think, they have a lifeboat from a boat, I think it was called the USS St. Louis, and what it was they escaped Germany. They knew they were going to be headed to the death camps. So they got on this lifeboat, and then they sailed around the whole world trying to find somebody who would take them in. South America? No. Came here? Nope. Nope. Very anti-Semitic. FDR, Democrats. Democrats were very anti-Semitic until communists, Jews, in the entertainment business became their cause celeb with the McCarthy hearings and all that. Then all of a sudden they were cool with Jews, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, they have a lifeboat from this ship, because what happened is they even got close enough to see the lights of Miami and waited and find out whether they could be rescued or not. And everybody turned them down. Why? So what happened? They had to go back to Germany, and they all perished. That's why they have the lifeboat there. Joseph Kennedy, the father of John F. Kennedy and the grandfather of RFK Jr., he was our ambassador to England, and he had a little associate over there in his office, and had a filing cabinet, and had a sticker on it, a poster that said, "This is the Jews' war." He was not interested at all in getting involved. He was very pro-Hitler, just like the king at the time. If you watch the king's speech, his brother took over when he abdicated for the Ho skank. So anyway, Joseph Kennedy, this guy had a bumper sticker. Well, anyway, Scotland Yard came in. This was our ambassador. And he said, hey, either this guy goes back to the U.S. or he goes to jail, because we're done with this anti-Semitism. We don't need it right now, leading up to the war. German U-boats, who got an infamous reputation in World War I for sinking ships indiscriminately, like the Lusitania that had people on board them. Well, of course they sank them. They said they were passenger liners, but they really had weapons and arms and food, etc., for England. Well, so what? Well, the German U-boats sat off our coast when FDR had at least done this Lend-Lease thing where you're sending convoys of food and things. I interviewed a British guy who was World War II generation. I interviewed him one time for an architect position on our team, and he told me that he would like to thank the Americans for Spam. He said that kind of got them through Spam, the canned meat, so-called. Anyway, these German U-boats would sit off the coast, and they would just pick off our ships that were coming off of our coast, pick off our ships. That's why they had to make convoys, and that helped somewhat. But you know how they saw our ships? They were silhouetted against the skyline of New York, New Jersey, Florida, whatever. And the owners and the visitors in these hotels, they didn't want to have a blackout. They didn't want to turn their lights out. They kind of like dinner and a show. They could watch these ships get shot. And you know what the German U-boat commanders called? You know what they called them? Their happy times. I forget what the translation is in Germany, but they called it their happy times. Good hunting, duck hunting, easy. Too easy. What do we lose? 1,500 ships trying to bring food to England who had war declared on them? So, I hope you'll turn off these Tucker Carlsons or Kelly, I hear her name in there, Dave Smith. I don't know these people, Nick Fuentes, but anybody that's telling you that, hey, Churchill was the villain, Hitler was the hero. I mean, come on. It's a little suspicious that they're so into the Muslim terrorist Islamo-Nazis in Gaza and so anti-Israel. It's a little bit too on the nose, as Scott Adams used to say. So people say, well, so isolationism killed. Isolationism kills. We weren't ready for that war. Should have been. Washington warned us in his farewell to the address or whatever about foreign entanglements, avoid foreign entanglement. Yeah, but he also said we won't be able to rely forever. We won't be able to count on two oceans forever to keep us out of stuff. Pearl Harbor, that was our state they attacked. Wasn't a state yet, but it was our gonna-be state anyway. The Romans had this saying that, their leaders, their thinkers had this saying that, the surest way to ensure peace is to be prepared for war. I think Sun Tzu says that in The Art of War too. I mean, you can't be a patsy and expect that Alexander Hamilton said, we can know what our ambition is. We can have no ambition on other countries, but that doesn't do anything to govern theirs. We can't change their ambition by just not having it ourselves. Isolationism kills. That's what kills. Not being prepared for war, not taking out people's nuclear capability before they can get it ready, not giving them money to get it ready, like Obama and Biden did. I mean, see, this is why children and women who act like children and men who act like women acting like children can't be involved in running the country. So don't, if you're gonna say, well, you're saying that about all women. No, of course not. Of course not. Some women are great, but they can't. They'll complain about toxic masculinity and then buy copies of 50 Shades of Grey. They'll complain about, well, my husband looked at pornography, but are they capable of getting women to quit being prostitutes and celluloid prostitutes? Apparently not. So, I can't talk about you as a group any more than I can talk about men who won't be men, like in Iran and like in America and like in our universities and media. So, what's the point of saying you're attacking all? Biden nominates a woman for the Supreme Court to go with the other women that are on there, that are anti-American and unqualified for being on there. But what does she do? She goes to the Grammys or something, and she's jumping up and down. Jumanji Jackson 5. She's jumping up and down when they're saying F ICE. Really? You don't think that case will come up? That's the one who said, I mean, she proved in the confirmation hearing that she should never be allowed anywhere near a court, let alone Supreme Court. She said, I don't know what a woman is because I'm not a biologist. They should have said, are you a woman? Because Biden said he wants a brown woman on the Supreme Court. So if you're not one, let us know now. How hard would that been to just flush her out of the system? Anyway, there's some sort of interesting facts about World War II as well. This one I kind of find interesting because I'm interested in all of history. But there was a French, Samuel de Champlain. I think Champlain was a French explorer, the Lake Champlain up in Canada and St. Lawrence and all that stuff that was kind of named after him. He left Normandy in 1642. Came over here, and his discoveries ultimately led to coming down the Mississippi and taking all of that for France and creating New Orleans. Orleans is a place in France, New Orleans. So 1642, he leaves kind of Normandy to come over here. 1942, just about exactly 300 years later, the New Orleans, where the site of the new D-Day Museum is, World War II Museum, D-Day Museum. I think Tom Hanks was involved in getting that going after he did Private Ryan. Anyway, they built the Higgins boats, which were the landing craft that went to Normandy to liberate that area. So 1642 to 1942 is full cycle. I think that's kind of interesting. So what did we have next? We had this insane progression of technology. Just insane. We went from, somebody put it this way, for thousands of years we rode a horse. The wheel was invented in 2500 BC. And you'll never hear me say BCE. That's BS. CE. I heard Ben Shapiro say it. I listened to a recorded book of his. CE. BCE. CE. What does that mean? For the current era, the common era. We can't say before Christ. Of course. Would Ben Shapiro say that Christ didn't exist? Even if you just said he was just a figure on the scene, like Charlie Manson or Lincoln or whatever. You can have the history without the mystery, okay? But BCE, okay. What's common about it? Before the common era, what's common about it? It was marked from his birth and death. A.D., Anno Domini, the year of our Lord. All the founding fathers would write a document in the year of our Lord. That's how they began a legal document, in the year of our Lord. BC, before Christ. That was our line. Before common. What's common about it? It's like saying pro-choice. I mean, it's so stupid. Pro-choice to do what? Pro-choice to have guns? Pro-choice to who to vote for? Pro-choice for taxes, for school, charter school, private school? No, there's no choice for anything. John Stossel pointed that out. Only slaughter the innocents. That's choice. That's where it is. So anyway, we had this insane progression of inventions. So we rode horses and used the wheel from, for thousands of years. Then from like 1900 to 1969, we went from inventing the horseless carriage to the moon. And we talked about everything being in terms of horsepower because of what these engines could do. There was a comedian, I think it was Brian Regan, I think he was telling another comedian, maybe Seinfeld, but he was telling him, they say that the space shuttle is 90 million horsepower. He said, don't you think if we're talking about a space shuttle, we ought to use something besides horsepower? I mean, that's pretty funny. If they talk about a Mustang has, the Ford Mustang, it has 400 horsepower or whatever they say. I don't know enough about cars to know, but something like that. I guess people could get their mind around, well, I used to have a horse, but now... so I see. So that'd be like if I hooked up 400 horses to that car. That's how much power it has. I know horsepower is just a physics term of a function of work that it could do, but you get the idea. It's kind of funny to talk about the space shuttle as being so many horsepower. I mean, how do you relate those two at all? It's not possible. So in 1947, Bell Labs invented the transistor, which really, they had vacuum tubes up until then. This was like a miracle. When I was a kid, these things came on that were called transistor radios. They came into play, and it was you don't have to plug the radio into the wall and sit around it like for fireside chats. You can take it with you in your pocket to the beach, whatever, because of a transistor. It's a little miracle, right? And then guys like Joe Rogan and he'll smoke some dope and read a book about how it was after Area 51 or whatever, the aliens, after we found the aliens, we started to have computer chips and transistors and all that. Computer chip was invented in 1958. It was a joint effort by Bell Labs and Xerox PARC, which was research center, PARC, IBM. They developed these things. That's who developed the computer. Then they say, we got the computer chips. And by the way, that's how the pyramids were built. There's no way anybody could ever build a pyramid unless it was an alien. Well, yeah, you just got to read a little bit. You got to learn a little bit. Scott Adams said that, what makes us assume that aliens would be exactly the same scale as us? It's childish. They could be the size of a microchip. They could be the size of giants. We could be like ants to them. Why would you assume that they're exactly the same, or that they're a reptile that has way more? They have way more knowledge than we have. I don't know. I don't know where this stuff comes from. One thing about conspiracies, we'll do a show on that, but you'll never know. So why would you assume something so stupid if you could just learn a little bit? I read this great book called something like Faster, Cheaper, Better, Smaller, Denser. And there's this Moore's law came in about that technology will double. Technology will double every X amount of years. The transistor, when it came out, that made radio going with you to school or the beach, whatever, that made that possible. It was about the size of your baby fingernail. And then when they invented chips, they put millions, and I think it's probably trillions now, I don't know, on a chip, which was 1/4 of an inch square. Integrated circuit, the IC, the chip. I had a brother-in-law who was a physics major from a major university, and he was working for a company, and this was in the 80s. This was in the 80s, the late 1900s. And he was working on a chip that did 1 trillion multiplications per second. And that wasn't fast enough. So he had it do 3 trillion. And that wasn't fast enough. So he had to gang 3 of them together to do 9 trillion multiplications per second in the 80s. So, you don't have to make this mental leap that, wow, how is this stuff even possible? Only with aliens. Oh, come on. You can learn a little bit. No offense, but you could learn a little bit about it. But, the good book says that because knowledge, not wisdom, knowledge will increase. And in the last days, it'll increase. But they will worship the creature more than the creator, because iniquity will abound and the love of many will grow cold. Iniquity means things being done wrong, evil. Yeah. So, no wonder we're so in awe of ourselves. What we can do is incredible. Incredible. Sorry. It's phenomenal what we're able to do. So we'll pick it up next time. I guess it'll be part 7. We'll pick it up right there. And thank you for listening. Thank you so much. We're all in this together. And we've got to win, or else. So we got to fight. You can't win if you don't fight. Thank you.